My parents held a family meeting at my house to announce they were giving it to my brother. I quietly put everything into an irrevocable trust instead. All right, get ready for this, because it's a story I still sometimes can't believe is real. It was a betrayal so profound, so utterly unthinkable, that it still makes my blood run cold. My own family, demanding I give them the home I'd poured my soul into. You know, I'm Tyler, 34, a real estate attorney. And honestly, I never thought my professional life would prepare me for defending my personal sanctuary against the very people who raised me. 5 years ago, I poured every ounce of my heart, every penny of my savings, and countless grueling weekends into transforming a beat-up fixer-upper. When my parents called, requesting a family meeting at my house, I expected, I don't know, maybe some good news. Retirement plans, a vacation announcement, something normal. What they dropped on me instead wasn't just a bombshell. It was a wrecking ball that shattered our entire relationship. Growing up in suburban Michigan, we looked like the picture of normalcy from the outside. Modest three-bedroom house, steady jobs for my parents, Richard and Linda, dad a factory supervisor, mom an elementary school administrative assistant. We weren't extravagant, but we had enough. Yet, from my earliest memories, there was always this glaring, undeniable truth. My younger brother, Kevin, for years my junior, was the undisputed golden child. He just always got the better end of every single situation. His birthday parties? Think bounce houses, professional entertainers. Mine? Usually just a pizza and a movie. Christmas? Kevin unwrapped the latest gaming console or fancy electronics, while I'd get, well, socks or school supplies. I spent years trying to figure out why. Maybe Kevin was more charismatic, always performing, always making people laugh. Or maybe it was his struggles in school that demanded more attention. Whatever the reason, this pattern was set in stone throughout our childhood, right into our teenage years. Then came college. My parents gave me next to nothing financially, maybe $5,000 total over 4 years, claiming they just couldn't afford more. So I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, while busting my butt to maintain a full course load. My summers weren't for relaxing, they were for earning. I graduated with student loans, sure, but thanks to my relentless work ethic, far less than most of my peers. Kevin, his entire undergraduate education was fully funded. My parents took out a second mortgage just to cover his expenses, including a plush off-campus apartment, not some dingy dorm. He changed majors 3 times, extending his college years, and they just kept on supporting him, no complaints, no questions asked. Despite all this, I persevered. After college, I spent 2 years at a title company, saving every penny for law school. Law school itself, entirely self-funded. Scholarships, loans, working part-time. I specialized in real estate law, finding a genuine satisfaction in helping people navigate one of the biggest investments of their lives. By 29, I'd established myself at a reputable firm in Grand Rapids. My hard work was paying off with a stable income and a growing client base. That's when I finally bought my first house, a dream I'd chased for years. This property, a 1960s ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms, was not pretty at first glance. It had been neglected for years. The previous owners, an elderly couple, couldn't maintain it. Stained carpets, a kitchen ripped straight out of the 70s with avocado green appliances, and a single bathroom featuring pink tiles that had definitely seen better days. But beneath all that outdated chaos, I saw potential. The structure was solid, the roof relatively new, the location excellent. Just 15 minutes from downtown, quiet, with mature trees. And at $180,000, it was within budget, leaving me enough to start the renovations. For the next 2 years, every single weekend, every free evening, was dedicated to transforming that house. I taught myself plumbing and electrical basics from online videos and hardware store workshops. I demolished the kitchen myself, salvaging what I could to save money. The bathroom renovation? 6 weeks of showering at my gym. I replaced every inch of flooring, painted every wall, updated fixtures, landscaped the previously overgrown yard. By the time the major renovations were done, I'd invested about $60,000 and countless hours of my own sweat and labor. The result? A home that truly reflected me. The kitchen boasted custom cabinets I'd built with a carpenter friend, quartz countertops I'd found on clearance, energy-efficient stainless steel appliances I snagged during sales. The bathroom was transformed with a walk-in shower, a modern vanity, and neutral tiles designed to stand the test of time. That third bedroom became my home office, complete with built-in bookshelves and a custom desk spanning one wall. Out back, a wooden deck I designed and built myself, perfect for summer barbecues and morning coffee. This house wasn't just property. It was tangible proof of my independence, my success, achieved without handouts or special treatment. Every corner held memories of problems solved and skills learned. I had transformed it with my own hands, just as I'd built my career and my life through sheer, persistent effort. During this time, my relationship with my family was cordial but distant. I'd visit for holidays, call my parents every couple of weeks. Kevin, meanwhile, was bouncing between sales jobs. He married his college girlfriend, Amanda, and they quickly had 2 kids, Ethan and Sophie, now 7 and 5. My parents retired when I was 32, with modest savings and their house finally paid off. They seemed content, babysitting for Kevin and Amanda, reveling in their grandparent roles. Last year, I heard through family whispers that Kevin and Amanda were having marital problems. Details were vague, but it sounded like financial stress and maybe even infidelity on his part. I kept my distance. I'd learned long ago that inserting myself into Kevin's problems always somehow led to me being blamed. 3 months ago, their divorce was finalized. Kevin moved into a small apartment, while Amanda stayed in their rented house with the kids. Child support and shared custody were established, though I gathered from my parents that Kevin was already struggling to meet his obligations. Around that same time, I noticed a spike in family contact. My parents called more often, always mentioning they were in my neighborhood and asking to stop by. These visits invariably included extravagant compliments about my house, detailed questions about the neighborhood, and comments about how much space I had for just one person. Kevin also started reaching out, suggesting we rebuild our brotherly bond. After years of minimal contact, these sudden efforts struck me as unusual, but I cautiously welcomed the apparent desire to improve things. During his visits, he'd often comment on specific features of my home, asking detailed questions about renovation costs and current property values. 2 weeks ago, my father called with an unusually formal request. He asked for a family meeting at my house the following Sunday afternoon. When I asked why, he vaguely mentioned important family matters that needed discussion. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I agreed, thinking maybe they wanted to discuss healthcare directives or retirement concerns. As the day approached, my parents called twice more to confirm, emphasizing that Kevin would be there and it was extremely important we all be present. The seriousness in their tone triggered mild anxiety, but I could never have anticipated what they actually had in mind. That Sunday arrived with perfect early autumn weather. I spent the morning cleaning my already tidy house, vacuuming the hardwood, dusting the shelves lined with law books. Even though they hadn't mentioned food, I prepared a simple spread: cheese, crackers, fruit, homemade cookies, coffee, tea. I wanted everyone to feel comfortable, despite my lingering unease about the mysterious agenda. Precisely at 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find not just my parents and Kevin, but also his 2 children, Ethan and Sophie. This was completely unexpected. No one had mentioned the kids. Kevin stood behind them with an overnight bag slung over his shoulder, as if they were planning to stay. My mother hugged me tightly. "Your home looks absolutely beautiful, Tyler. You've done such amazing work here," she gushed, her eyes scanning the entryway. My father clapped my shoulder with unusual enthusiasm. "Son, this place gets better every time we visit. You've created something special." Kevin guided his children inside, avoiding my gaze. "Kids, this is Uncle Tyler's house. What do you think?" 7-year-old Ethan looked around wide-eyed. "It's big. Bigger than our apartment." 5-year-old Sophie nodded. "Do you have a playroom, Uncle Tyler?" Before I could answer, Kevin interjected. "Maybe you'll have your own rooms here someday. Would you like that?" The comment struck me as odd, but I brushed it aside. Casual conversation, right? I showed everyone to the living room where I'd arranged seating. The kids immediately gravitated toward the cookies while the adults settled. "So, what's this important family discussion about?" I asked, pouring coffee for my parents. My father cleared his throat, adopting his business meeting posture from his working days. We thought it would be best to discuss this all together, as a family unit. My mother nodded, hands folded primly. Family is the most important thing, after all. Kevin had already claimed my favorite reading chair, the one with the best view of the backyard, running his hand along the arm almost possessively. The kids really need stability right now, with everything they've been through with the divorce. I noticed him exchanging glances with my parents, a look of shared understanding that explicitly excluded me. The atmosphere had shifted, from casual gathering to something formal, something tense. My father kept straightening his collar, a nervous habit before delivering difficult news. "Tyler," my mother began, "you've done so well for yourself. Your career is thriving, and this house is absolutely wonderful." My father added, "We're so proud of how you've established yourself," though his tone lacked the warmth such a statement should carry. Kevin nodded along, then piped up, "Not everyone has been as fortunate, though. Some of us have had some setbacks." My parents looked at Kevin with such profound sympathy that a twist of discomfort tightened in my stomach. I'd seen this dynamic countless times, the rallying around Kevin whenever he faced consequences of his own making. "These past few months have been very challenging," my mother said, patting Kevin's knee. "With the divorce and having to move out, Kevin has been struggling to provide the kind of home his children deserve." My father nodded solemnly. Family legacies and supporting the next generation are what truly matter. Property is just property, but what we do with it can make all the difference for our loved ones. Kevin jumped in. "The apartment I'm renting barely has room for the three of us when I have the kids. Ethan and Sophie are sharing a tiny bedroom. It's no way for children to live." The children, who had been quietly eating cookies, perked up at the mention of their names. "I want my own room," Ethan declared, "with space for my Lego table." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "And I want pink walls and a princess bed." Kevin smiled at his children, then looked pointedly around my living room. A house like this would give them exactly what they need. Room to grow and be happy. The direction of the conversation became horrifyingly clear, sending a chill straight down my spine. My father suggested we move to the dining room table to discuss matters properly. As we relocated, I watched Kevin take a detour through the hallway, opening doors, peering into rooms as if conducting an inspection. The children followed, pointing and whispering. Once we were all seated at the dining table, my father folded his hands, like he was about to kick off a formal meeting. My mother sat beside him, nervously adjusting her necklace. Kevin strategically placed the children on either side of him, an obvious visual reminder of his parental status. "Tyler," my father began, in a tone that tried, and failed, to sound casual, "we've been discussing as a family how we might address Kevin's housing situation in a way that benefits everyone." My mother jumped in. "We believe we've come up with the perfect solution that keeps property in the family while providing for the next generation." Kevin nodded eagerly, his eyes still not meeting mine, instead continuing to scan the dining room, assessing it like a property he was considering purchasing. The uncomfortable feeling in my stomach intensified. They had been planning this, coordinating their approach. All those recent visits, their unusual interest in my home's features and value. It took on a sinister new meaning. They hadn't been evaluating my house with admiration, but with cold, calculating intent. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I was starting to suspect the unfathomable answer. My father looked at my mother, then at Kevin, before turning back to me with what he clearly thought was a reasonable expression. "We believe the most sensible solution would be for you to give this house to Kevin and the children." "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, certain I'd misheard. The dining room suddenly felt airless, all oxygen sucked out in an instant. My father maintained his businesslike demeanor. "We think you should sign over your house to Kevin. He needs a stable home for the children, and you are in a position to provide that." My mother chimed in. "This house would be perfect for them. 3 bedrooms, the nice backyard for the children to play in, the excellent school district. It makes perfect sense." I stared at them, waiting for someone to crack a smile, to reveal this was an elaborate, twisted joke. No one did. Instead, Kevin nodded along with my parents' words while his children began discussing which bedrooms would be theirs. "I want the big one at the end of the hall," Ethan announced. "That's Tyler's master bedroom," my mother told him with an indulgent smile. "But I'm sure once Uncle Tyler moves his things out, your daddy can help you set it up however you like." "Moves his things out," I echoed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. You cannot be serious. This is my home. I bought it. I renovated it. I paid for it. My father frowned slightly, as if I was being unnecessarily difficult. Now, Tyler, we understand this would be an adjustment, but family needs to support family. Kevin is going through a difficult time, and he has the children to consider. And where exactly am I supposed to live? I asked, still struggling to process the sheer audacity. You could easily find an apartment, my mother suggested brightly. With your income, it would be no problem at all. You're just one person, after all. You don't need all this space. Kevin finally spoke directly to me. It would only be temporary, until I get back on my feet. Maybe a year or two. The casual way he suggested I surrender my home for a year or two struck me as so disconnected from reality that I nearly laughed. I had spent 2 years renovating this house, customizing every single detail. The idea that I should simply walk away from it because my brother had, yet again, created problems for himself was beyond comprehension. This is not happening, I said firmly. I am not giving away my house. Not to Kevin. Not to anyone. My father's expression hardened. We're not asking you to give it away. We're asking you to give it to family. There's a difference. A huge difference, my mother emphasized. This stays in the family. It's not like you're losing it. Except I would be losing it. I countered. I would no longer own the home I worked for years to buy and renovate. I would no longer live in it. How is that not losing it? Kevin leaned forward, his tone taking on an edge I recognized from childhood arguments when he didn't get his way. You always were selfish, Tyler. Some things are more important than property. Like family. Like my kids having a stable home. My selfishness is not the issue here, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. The issue is that you all came into my home and announced your expectation that I should give it to Kevin, without any prior discussion, without considering my feelings or my rights as the owner. My father waved his hand dismissively. We're discussing it now? And we have considered everything carefully. This is the most logical solution. Logical for whom? I demanded. Certainly not for me. You make good money, my mother pointed out. You can buy another house. Kevin can't afford to buy any house right now. That is not my problem to solve, I replied. I sympathize with his situation, but giving him my house is not the answer. Kevin's face flushed with anger. Not your problem? We're family. My problems are your problems. That's how it works. I shook my head. No, that's not how it works. Not when the solution involves me giving up something this significant. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents took turns explaining why their plan made perfect sense from their perspective. They pointed out that Kevin had children while I did not, suggesting this somehow entitled him to my property. They reminded me of times they had supported me growing up, conveniently forgetting the vast disparity in how they treated their 2 sons. As the argument escalated, certain revelations emerged that made the situation even more disturbing. Kevin mentioned he had already told his children they'd be moving into a big new house soon. My mother admitted they had spoken to their friend Margaret, a realtor, about potential property transfer within the family and what paperwork would be involved. But the most shocking moment came when Ethan innocently asked, "Daddy, can we paint my new room blue, like you promised?" Kevin replied, "Of course, buddy. Once the house is ours, we can make any changes we want." The casual confidence with which he said this, and the clear indication that these discussions and promises had been happening for some time, hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a spontaneous suggestion. This was a calculated plan they had been developing behind my back for weeks, if not months. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my voice quiet, laced with controlled anger. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. My father finally answered. "We started discussing options when Kevin's divorce was finalized 3 months ago." 3 months. I repeated. "For 3 months, you have been planning to take my house, all while visiting me here, accepting my hospitality, commenting on my renovations?" "Don't be dramatic, Tyler," my mother scolded. "No one is taking anything. We're asking you to help your brother during a difficult time. By giving him my house," I clarified. "The house I spent years saving for, months searching for, and 2 years renovating with my own hands." "You're a lawyer," my father said, as if this was relevant. "You understand how property transfers work. It would be simple paperwork for you." I stood up from the table, no longer able to contain my anger. The simplicity of the paperwork is not the issue. The issue is that you came into my home with the expectation that I would sign it over to Kevin because he needs it more than I do, in your estimation. That is not how property ownership works. That is not how respect works. Kevin stood as well, his face contorted with that familiar expression of thwarted entitlement I remembered from our childhood. You've always been like this. Always keeping score. Always holding back from helping family. I have children, Tyler. Does that mean nothing to you? Your children are not my responsibility, I replied calmly. And your housing situation is not my problem to solve, especially not at the cost of my own home. My mother began to cry, a tactic I'd seen countless times when family disagreements didn't go her way. I cannot believe you would be so cruel to your own brother and his innocent children. My father stood and put his arm around her. I think we should leave. Clearly, Tyler needs time to think about his priorities and what family really means. I raised you better than this, Tyler. The irony of that statement was not lost on me, but I chose not to respond. Instead, I held the door open as they filed out. Kevin paused at the threshold to deliver one final, venomous jab. I always knew you were selfish, but I never thought you would put a house before your own family. Think about my kids, Tyler. If not for me, then for them. When the door closed behind them, the silence in my house was deafening. I returned to the dining room and mechanically cleared away the untouched food and drinks, my mind replaying the surreal conversation. It seemed impossible that my family had actually expected me to simply hand over my home. But as the shock began to wear off, I realized this request was perfectly in line with the family dynamic that had existed my entire life. Kevin's needs always came first. Kevin's problems were always more important. The only difference was the sheer scale of what they were asking for this time. That first night, I barely slept. I sat in my living room until dawn, just looking around the space I'd created, remembering the countless hours of work that went into each detail. The built-in bookshelf that took 3 weekends. The hardwood floors I'd refinished by hand until my arms ached. The kitchen backsplash I'd installed tile by tile. This house was more than property. It was a physical manifestation of my hard work, my independence, my personal achievement. By morning, my shock had transformed into a simmering, righteous anger. I went to work distracted, unable to focus. My assistant noticed, but wisely kept her distance. At lunch, my phone began buzzing with text messages from extended family members. An aunt I rarely spoke with asked why I was being so difficult about helping Kevin. A cousin questioned if I really needed such a big house for just one person. It became horrifyingly clear my parents had wasted no time in sharing their skewed version of events with the wider family. By evening, my voicemail was full. My mother had called 3 times, each message more emotional than the last, alternating between guilt trips about family obligation and thinly veiled suggestions that I was selfish. My father's single message was curt, stating we needed to resolve this situation like adults. Kevin had texted repeatedly throughout the day, his messages growing increasingly hostile. The kids are devastated. They were so excited about their new rooms. How can you sleep at night knowing your niece and nephew are crammed into a tiny apartment while you have empty bedrooms? You always were the selfish one. Some things never change. I didn't respond to any of it. I needed time to process, to figure out how to navigate this unprecedented assault. That night, around 9:30, I heard a car door slam outside. Peering through the blinds, I recognized Kevin's sedan parked across the street. He sat there for nearly 20 minutes, engine off, just watching my house. Eventually, he drove away without approaching. The incident left me feeling deeply unsettled, almost violated. The next day brought more of the same. My distraction was obvious at work. Martin, a fellow attorney specializing in family law, pulled me aside. "You seem off, Tyler. Everything okay?" I gave him a brief, sanitized version of the situation. His eyebrows shot up higher with each detail. "They expected you to just give your brother your house, just like that?" "Apparently," I confirmed. "And now they're making me out to be the villain for refusing." Martin shook his head in disbelief. "Family can be something else. Let me know if you need anything, even just someone to vent to." I appreciated his support, but I was still too raw to delve deeper. I thanked him and retreated to my office, where I found 3 more voicemails from family members I rarely spoke with, all expressing disappointment in my unwillingness to help family in need. That evening, I arrived home to find Kevin's car already in my driveway, blocking me from pulling in. He was standing on my porch, arms crossed. I parked on the street and approached, cautiously aware of neighbors who might witness whatever was about to unfold. "We need to talk," Kevin stated flatly. "Not like this," I replied. "Not with you showing up unannounced at my home. Our parents raised us to value family above all else," he said, ignoring my response. "I've always looked up to you, Tyler. I thought you were someone who understood what matters." "What matters is respect," I countered. "Respect for boundaries. Respect for property rights. Respect for the years of work I put into this house." Kevin scoffed. "Property rights? Listen to yourself. This is family we're talking about, not some legal transaction." "It is both," I said firmly. "You are asking for a legal transfer of property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm asking for help from my brother," he shouted, his composure cracking. "My kids need stability. They need a home." "They have a home," I pointed out. "Your apartment may not be ideal, but it's a roof over their heads. Many people raise children in apartments. They deserve better." Kevin insisted. "They deserve this," he gestured at my house. "Why this house specifically?" I asked. "Why not ask our parents to help you with a down payment on a different house? Why does it have to be my home?" Kevin's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something calculating crossing his features before he composed himself. "This neighborhood is perfect for the kids. The schools are excellent. It's close to our parents for childcare help." His answer seemed rehearsed, lacking genuine emotion. I pushed further. "If our parents are so concerned about your housing situation, why aren't they offering solutions? They own their home outright. They could sell it and help you buy something." Kevin's face flushed. "Their house is their retirement security. They can't just give that up. But I should give up my house," I challenged. "My home is somehow less important than theirs." "You don't have kids," he exclaimed, as though this was the ultimate trump card. "What do you need all this space for?" Before I could respond, a neighbor walking his dog slowed his pace, clearly interested in our increasingly heated exchange. I lowered my voice. "This conversation is over, Kevin. Please leave my property." "Our parents were right," he spat. "You've always been selfish. Always looking out for number one. Leave now, or I will call the police and report you for trespassing," I said calmly. He glared at me for a long moment before stalking back to his car. As he pulled away, he rolled down his window and shouted, "This is not over, Tyler." The confrontation left me shaken. Kevin's behavior seemed excessive, even for him, suggesting there was more to this situation than simply needing a larger home for his children. His reaction to my suggestion that our parents could sell their house was particularly telling. There was a deeper agenda at work, and I was determined to uncover it. The next morning, I installed a security camera at my front door, linked to an app on my phone. Given Kevin's unpredictable behavior, it seemed a necessary precaution. I also changed the locks, realizing with a growing sense of unease that my parents had a spare key I'd given them for emergencies years ago. By the end of the week, the situation had escalated further. Kevin showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the reception area that required security to intervene. He told anyone who would listen that I was denying housing to my niece and nephew out of spite. Several colleagues witnessed the embarrassing display, including partners at the firm. That night, I received a call from my Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, the family member I'd always felt closest to. Unlike the other relatives who had contacted me, she began by asking for my version of events. I explained everything in detail, the ambush, the harassment. "That doesn't sound like the full story I heard from your mother," Aunt Barbara said thoughtfully. "She made it sound like you had previously discussed this arrangement and then suddenly changed your mind." "Absolutely not," I assured her. "The first I heard of this plan was when they announced it in my dining room, having already told the children they would be moving in." Aunt Barbara was quiet for a moment. "You know, Tyler, something similar happened years ago with your grandmother's jewelry. Your mother told everyone that your grandmother had promised certain pieces to Kevin's wife as wedding gifts, when in fact no such conversation had ever occurred. Your grandmother was quite upset about it." This revelation added another layer to my understanding. The pattern of behavior extended beyond my immediate family, hinting at a troubling willingness to misrepresent reality to achieve desired outcomes. "What should I do, Aunt Barbara?" I asked, grateful for a family member who finally seemed to understand. "Protect yourself," she advised, without hesitation. I love your parents and Kevin, but this behavior is not acceptable. You need to establish clear boundaries and possibly seek legal protection. Her words reinforced what I had already been considering. After we ended the call, I sat at my desk and began researching options for protecting my property from future claims or pressure. As a real estate attorney, I was familiar with various forms of ownership and transfer restrictions, but I never thought I'd need to apply this knowledge to protect my home from my own family. The following day brought another disturbing development. I received an email from a local realtor confirming an appointment to evaluate my home for a potential listing. I had made no such appointment. When I called the realtor, she explained that she had been contacted by Kevin, who claimed to be helping me sell my house and needed a market valuation. This unauthorized action crossed a line from emotional manipulation into potential fraud. I immediately called Kevin and left a voicemail, making it clear that any further misrepresentation of his authority regarding my property would result in legal action. I also contacted the realtor to explain the situation and ensure no further communication occurred without my direct involvement. That weekend, Kevin's car drove slowly past my house 3 separate times. My security camera captured him walking up to my porch late Saturday night, peering through windows, before leaving when a neighbor's motion sensor light activated. Sleep became elusive. I found myself checking the security camera app multiple times during the night, starting at every sound. The stress began affecting my work performance, and I realized I could not continue in this holding pattern. I needed to take definitive action. Monday morning, I arrived at work early and sought out Christine, a colleague who specialized in trust and estate law. Her expertise in asset protection strategies would be invaluable. An irrevocable trust, Christine repeated after I explained what I was looking for. That's quite a significant step, Tyler. Once you place your home in such a trust, you cannot simply change your mind later. I understand, I assured her. But given the circumstances, I need something that will provide absolute protection from family pressure or claims. Christine nodded thoughtfully. An irrevocable trust would certainly accomplish that. Once the property is in the trust, you no longer technically own it, though you can continue to use and enjoy it according to the trust terms. It would make it legally impossible for you to transfer the house to your brother, even if you later decided you wanted to. That is exactly what I need, I said. Something that takes the decision completely out of my hands. She pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. We'd need to establish clear terms. You'd name trustees other than yourself, possibly a corporate trustee for additional protection. We'd define beneficiaries and conditions for eventual distribution. How quickly can we set this up? I asked. For something this important, we shouldn't rush, Christine cautioned. However, given the situation you've described, I understand the urgency. If we focus exclusively on this, we could potentially have everything prepared within 2 weeks. 2 weeks seemed like an eternity given the ongoing pressure, but I recognized the need for thoroughness. Let's proceed, I decided. In the meantime, is there any temporary protection I can put in place? Christine suggested filing a formal letter with the county recorder's office, stating that any property transfers would require specific verification protocols. While not foolproof, it would create an additional hurdle. Over the next several days, I gathered all documentation related to my home. The original purchase agreement, mortgage documents, records of renovations and improvements, tax assessments, current market valuations. Christine had emphasized the importance of establishing clear documentation of the property's value and my sole ownership before transferring it into the trust. I also met with a financial advisor to discuss the broader implications of placing my primary residence in an irrevocable trust. We reviewed potential tax consequences, impact on future borrowing ability, and strategies for managing the property through the trust. You'll need to carefully select your trustees, the advisor emphasized. These individuals will have significant control over the property, even though you will continue living there. They need to be people you trust implicitly, who cannot be pressured by your family. I considered my options carefully. Martin, my colleague from the family law department, was someone I respected and trusted. As an attorney, he understood fiduciary responsibility and wouldn't be easily swayed. For the second trustee, I thought of my mentor from law school, Professor Raymond, who had always demonstrated impeccable ethics and judgment. The corporate trustee role would be filled by a trust company Christine recommended, providing an institutional layer of protection and continuity. With these decisions made, Christine began drafting the trust documents. The process required careful consideration of every detail, from defining acceptable property uses to establishing protocols for maintenance expenses and eventual disposition. While the legal work progressed, I took additional steps to secure my home physically. I upgraded to a comprehensive security system with motion sensors and cameras covering all entry points. I installed new, more secure locks on all doors and windows. I even consulted with a security specialist who advised strategic landscaping changes to improve visibility and reduce potential hiding spots. Throughout this period, the pressure from my family continued unabated. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and expressions of disappointment. Kevin's approach became more erratic, swinging between angry accusations and sudden attempts at reconciliation that felt manipulative and insincere. "Maybe we can work something out," he suggested during one call. "What if I buy the house from you? You could finance it for me, with very low payments for the first few years until I get back on my feet." The proposal was financially absurd, essentially asking me to give him the house while pretending it was a legitimate transaction. I declined politely but firmly, reiterating that the house was not available for transfer under any circumstances. "You're making a huge mistake," he warned. "Our parents are incredibly disappointed in you. Is that what you want? To hurt them like this in their retirement years?" The emotional manipulation was becoming more sophisticated, targeting what they perceived as my vulnerabilities. What they failed to understand was that each attempt only strengthened my resolve and confirmed I was making the right decision. 2 weeks after my initial consultation with Christine, the trust documents were ready for review. We spent an entire afternoon going through every clause, ensuring I fully understood the implications. "Once you sign these papers and we record the deed transferring the property to the trust, there is no going back," Christine emphasized. "The house will no longer be yours to sell or give away. You will be a beneficiary of the trust with the right to live in the property, but the trustees will have legal control." "I understand completely," I assured her. "That is exactly the protection I need." The following day, Martin and Professor Raymond joined us to review their responsibilities as trustees. Both had agreed to serve after hearing a summarized version of the situation. The corporate trustee representative participated via video conference, explaining their role. As we finalized the preparations, I felt a growing sense of relief. For the first time since that disastrous family meeting, I was taking proactive steps rather than merely reacting to my family's demands. The trust would create an immovable barrier against their pressure, one that could not be overcome by guilt trips or emotional appeals. The day we signed the trust documents and filed the new deed, I felt as though a massive weight had been lifted. The house was now legally held by the Tyler Bennett Residential Trust, with clear provisions for my continued residence and eventual disposition of the property according to my wishes, not anyone else's demands. Christine provided me with formal letters to send to my family members, explaining in legal terminology that the property had been placed in an irrevocable trust and was no longer available for transfer under any circumstances. The letters were carefully worded to be factual rather than confrontational, simply stating the new legal reality. "Now what?" I asked Christine as we left the county recorder's office. "Now, you invite them to a meeting," she suggested, "on neutral ground, not in your home. And I strongly recommend having legal representation present." The prospect of another family confrontation was daunting, but I recognized the necessity of formally communicating the new situation. It was time to reclaim control of the narrative and establish clear boundaries. I selected a private dining room at a local restaurant, public enough to discourage extreme behavior, but private enough for a candid conversation. I invited my parents and Kevin via formal email, stating only that I wished to discuss the house situation and reach a resolution. I didn't mention the trust or my attorney's presence, wanting to ensure they would actually attend. To my surprise, they all accepted promptly. Perhaps they thought I had reconsidered. Perhaps they saw this as an opportunity to apply renewed pressure in a public setting where I might feel uncomfortable creating a scene. Whatever their reasoning, the meeting was set for Saturday afternoon. I arrived 30 minutes early with Martin, who had agreed to attend as both my attorney and as one of the trustees. We selected seats facing the door and arranged the table so that water glasses and bread baskets wouldn't obstruct the recording device Martin had brought. Michigan, being a one-party consent state for recordings, meant we were within our legal rights to document the conversation without informing the others. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking somber but determined. Kevin arrived 3 minutes later, his expression shifting from confident to utterly confused when he spotted Martin sitting beside me. "Who is this?" he demanded immediately. "This is Martin Greenberg, my attorney, and a trustee of my residential property trust," I replied calmly. "He is here in both capacities today." My father's eyebrows shot up. "Trustee? What are you talking about, Tyler?" "Please sit down." I gestured to the chairs across from us. "I will explain everything." My mother glanced nervously at Martin. "Is this really necessary? Having a lawyer at a family discussion?" "Given the nature of our last family discussion, yes, I believe it is," I replied. Once they were seated, I wasted no time. 2 weeks ago, I established an irrevocable trust and transferred my home into it. The trust has 3 trustees: Martin here, my law school mentor Professor Raymond, and Midwest Trust Company as the corporate trustee. I am the primary beneficiary with lifetime residential rights. Kevin's face flushed with anger. "What does that legal gibberish mean?" Martin answered for me. "It means that Tyler no longer personally owns the house. It is owned by the trust. By the terms of the trust agreement, the property cannot be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of except under very specific conditions that do not include transferring it to family members." "You cannot do that," Kevin exclaimed, his voice rising. "That is our family home." "Actually, he absolutely can do that, and he has," Martin replied evenly. "And I must correct you on one point. It is not your family home. It was Tyler's personal property, purchased with his own funds, and is now held in trust for his benefit." My father leaned forward, his business negotiation face firmly in place. "Surely this can be undone. Trusts can be dissolved." "Not this type," Martin explained. "As the name suggests, an irrevocable trust cannot be revoked once established. The property will remain in trust according to the terms established in the trust document." "Tyler," my mother said, her voice trembling with either genuine emotion or a practiced performance. "Why would you do this? Why would you make it impossible to help your brother?" "I did this because I was left with no choice," I replied. After our last meeting, it became clear that the pressure to transfer my home to Kevin would continue indefinitely. This provides a definitive resolution to the matter. Kevin slammed his hand on the table, causing the water glasses to jump. "This is ridiculous. You're hiding behind legal tricks to avoid helping family." Martin remained perfectly calm. "Mr. Bennett, I would advise moderating your tone and behavior. We are in a public establishment, and outbursts will not help resolve the situation." "Who asked you?" Kevin snapped at him before turning back to me. "You've always been like this, Tyler. Always finding ways to put yourself first." "That is not true," I said quietly. "In fact, throughout our lives, I have repeatedly stepped aside while you received preferential treatment. This house represents years of my hard work and personal sacrifice. It is the one thing I have not been willing to give up for you." My father shook his head dismissively. "Ancient history. We're talking about the present situation. Kevin needs help now, and I would have been willing to help in many ways," I countered. "I could have assisted with finding affordable housing. I could have helped with job connections. What I was not willing to do was give up my home. The children need stability," my mother insisted. "They need a proper home, with a yard and their own rooms. Many children grow up in apartments," I pointed out. "The issue here is not really about what the children need. It is about what Kevin wants." Kevin's face contorted with anger. "You have no idea what my children need. You don't have kids. You've never had to struggle like I have." Something in his phrasing caught my attention. "Struggle like you have, Kevin? You have received support from our parents your entire life. They paid for your college. They helped with your wedding. They babysit your children regularly. What exactly has been your great struggle?" "You know nothing about my life," he shouted. "Do you have any idea how hard it is being divorced, paying child support, trying to maintain 2 households? Those are consequences of your own choices," I replied calmly. "Your divorce was not my doing. Your financial situation is not my responsibility to fix, especially not at the cost of my home." My father tried a different approach. "Tyler, be reasonable. What Kevin is going through affects all of us as a family. His children are your niece and nephew. Don't you want what's best for them? Of course I do, I agreed. But giving up my home is not the solution. And frankly, I am not convinced that is what this is really about. What is that supposed to mean? Kevin demanded. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me honestly, Kevin, if I had agreed to give you my house, what were your plans for it long term? A flicker of something passed across his face, too quick to identify, but enough to confirm my suspicions. I told you, he said defensively, to provide a stable home for my children. And you would have lived there indefinitely? I pressed. No plans to sell it once you had clear title? Kevin's hesitation was brief, but telling. My mother jumped in quickly. Of course he would live there. That was the whole point. But I kept my eyes on Kevin, who couldn't quite meet my gaze. The property values in my neighborhood have increased significantly since I purchased and renovated. The house is likely worth at least $100,000 more than what I paid originally. That equity would be quite tempting for someone in financial difficulty, wouldn't it? You're being paranoid. Kevin scoffed, but his eyes darted away. Martin cleared his throat. Actually, we took the liberty of checking recent credit reports and court filings. Mr. Kevin Bennett currently has 3 outstanding civil judgments against him for unpaid debts, and his credit report shows multiple accounts in collections. His financial situation appears significantly more precarious than simply struggling with divorce expenses. Kevin's face went from red to ashen white. You had no right to dig into my personal finances. We had every right to investigate potential motivations when significant property interests were at stake, Martin replied calmly. My father looked genuinely confused. Kevin, what is he talking about? What judgments? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Just some business deals that didn't work out. Nothing important. $28,000 in unpaid business loans is quite significant, Martin noted, as is $15,000 in credit card debt currently in collections. My mother turned to Kevin in shock. You never mentioned any of this. It wasn't relevant. Kevin muttered. It seems extremely relevant when you are asking for a house worth over $300,000, I pointed out. Were you planning to take out a home equity loan once the property was in your name, or perhaps sell it outright? Kevin's silence was all the confirmation needed. My parents looked between us, their expressions suggesting they were finally processing this new, devastating information. The point is moot now, anyway, Martin interjected smoothly. The property is in an irrevocable trust. It cannot be transferred to Kevin or anyone else outside the specific terms of the trust. This is not over, Kevin declared, standing abruptly. There must be a way to break this trust thing. There is not, Martin assured him. And any attempt to contest the trust would only result in significant legal expenses with no possibility of success. We'll see about that, Kevin threatened, but his bravado sounded hollow. As he stormed out of the private dining room, my parents remained seated, looking suddenly older and uncertain. We didn't know about Kevin's financial problems, my father said quietly. He told us he was managing fine, aside from the adjustment to paying child support. Did you ever actually ask him directly about his finances before suggesting he should have my house? I asked. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. We took him at his word, my mother admitted. Just as you have always done, I noted, without malice, simply stating a pattern I had observed throughout our lives. Perhaps we should have asked more questions, my father acknowledged, reluctantly. The admission, small as it was, felt like a significant shift. For perhaps the first time, they were seeing Kevin's situation with clearer eyes, not automatically accepting his narrative or prioritizing his needs above all else. I hope you understand now why I had to take these steps to protect my property, I said. This was never about refusing to help family. It was about preventing my home from being taken under false pretenses. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We never meant to take anything from you, Tyler. We truly thought this was a solution that would help everyone. By having me give up my home, I reminded her gently. That would not have helped me at all. I suppose we didn't think through all the implications, my father admitted. No, I agreed. You did not. The conversation continued for another hour, more measured and honest than any discussion we had had in years. My parents began to acknowledge, however reluctantly, that their approach had been fundamentally unfair. They expressed regret for how the situation had been handled, though they stopped short of apologizing directly for the request itself. As we prepared to leave, my father asked, "Where do we go from here, Tyler?" That depends on whether you can respect my boundaries going forward, I replied. I am willing to maintain a relationship, but only if my property and my choices are respected. And Kevin, my mother asked. That is up to him, I said honestly. But I will not tolerate further harassment or attempts to pressure me about my house. They nodded soberly, the reality of the new family dynamic settling in. As Martin and I watched them leave, he commented, family situations are always the most complicated. Do you think anything will change with Kevin? Probably not, I admitted. But with my parents? Maybe. For the first time, they might be seeing the pattern more clearly. Whether this insight would lead to lasting change remained to be seen, but I had taken the necessary steps to protect myself regardless of what came next. The house was secure in the trust, and with it, my peace of mind. In the days following our confrontation at the restaurant, an unusual silence fell over my family communications. No calls from my parents, no texts from Kevin, no pressure from extended family members. The abrupt cessation of contact was both a relief and slightly disconcerting. After weeks of constant harassment, I used this period of quiet to focus on reclaiming my sense of security and peace in my home. I spent a weekend repainting my office, choosing a new color scheme that felt fresh and energizing. I replaced some of the furniture that carried memories of the family meeting, rearranging the living room to create a new flow and atmosphere. These small changes helped me psychologically reclaim the space as my own. 2 weeks after our meeting, I received a text message from my father. Your mother and I have been doing some thinking. Can we talk sometime? I agreed to meet them for lunch the following weekend, specifying a public restaurant to maintain neutral territory. I arrived to find only my parents, no sign of Kevin. They looked tired but composed, lacking the righteous certainty they had displayed during our previous encounters. We owe you an apology, my father began, once we were seated, surprising me with his directness. We should never have put you in that position. We got caught up in trying to solve Kevin's problems. My mother added, we didn't stop to think about how unfair our request was to you. Their apology, while welcome, felt somewhat incomplete. They were sorry for how they had approached the situation, but I sensed they still didn't fully grasp the deeper issue of the lifetime pattern of favoritism toward Kevin. What made you reconsider? I asked. My father hesitated before answering. After the meeting, we asked Kevin directly about the financial judgments your attorney mentioned. He admitted they were real, but tried to minimize their significance. When we pressed for details, he became defensive and eventually stormed out. We started looking more closely at things after that. My mother continued. We spoke with Amanda, who told us Kevin had been hiding financial problems throughout their marriage. Apparently, his spending habits were a major factor in their divorce. This revelation did not surprise me. Kevin had always lived beyond his means, expecting others to bail him out when consequences caught up with him. We also realized something about ourselves, my father admitted reluctantly. We have always rushed to fix things for Kevin without holding him accountable. It hasn't really helped him in the long run. This acknowledgement, however belated, felt significant. It suggested the possibility of a shift in the family dynamic that had defined our relationships for decades. I appreciate your apology, I said sincerely. Moving forward, I need to know that my boundaries will be respected. They will be, my mother promised. We were wrong to ask you to give up your home. It is yours, and you worked hard for it. What about Kevin? I asked. Where does he stand in all this? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. He is still angry, my father confessed. He believes you have abandoned the family by not helping him. That is his perspective, I replied evenly. My perspective is that I have simply protected what is rightfully mine. We understand that now, my mother assured me. We have told Kevin that we will not support any further attempts to pressure you about your house. Whether Kevin would accept this new boundary remained to be seen, but my parents' shift in perspective was a positive development. We finished lunch with cautious conversation about neutral topics. The tension noticeably reduced, though not entirely gone. Over the next 6 months, a new pattern gradually emerged in our family interactions. My parents and I began rebuilding our relationship on more balanced terms. They visited my house occasionally, but these visits now carried a different energy, free from the calculating assessment I had sensed before. They no longer commented on the space or suggested it was excessive for one person. Instead, they simply appreciated it as my home, respecting the work and care I had invested in it. Kevin remained distant, declining to attend any gathering where I would be present. He had apparently found a larger apartment in a different neighborhood and had moved his children there. According to my parents, he was working with a financial counselor to address his debt issues, though whether this was by choice or necessity was unclear. The irrevocable trust continued to serve its purpose, providing both practical protection for my property and psychological reassurance for me. Knowing that my home was legally secure allowed me to focus on other aspects of my life that had been neglected during the family crisis. I began attending a weekly therapy session, working through the complex emotions stirred up by the conflict. The therapist helped me recognize patterns from childhood that had conditioned me to doubt my right to maintain boundaries with family. Through these sessions, I developed stronger skills for asserting my needs without guilt or apology. I also expanded my social circle, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones through community activities. I joined a local recreational basketball league and a book club, creating connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. These relationships, built on mutual respect and choice rather than familial duty, brought a refreshing dynamic to my life. About a year after the trust was established, my parents invited me to dinner at their home. To my surprise, Kevin was also present. The atmosphere was tense but civil. Kevin acknowledged me with a nod, but little else. Throughout dinner, he remained mostly quiet, offering minimal responses when directly addressed. After dinner, as my parents cleared the table, Kevin and I found ourselves momentarily alone in the living room. "I still think you were wrong," he stated flatly. "Family should help family." "I agree with that principle," I replied calmly. "But help should not require sacrifice of this magnitude from only one party." He shrugged, unwilling to concede the point, but also not escalating the argument. "Whatever. It's done now." While far from a reconciliation, this brief exchange marked a shift from active hostility to cold detachment. It was progress of a sort, though I harbored no illusions about rebuilding a close, brotherly relationship. As the second anniversary of my home purchase approached, I hosted a small gathering to celebrate. My parents attended, bringing a housewarming gift, as though acknowledging the home was truly mine for the first time. Aunt Barbara came along, as did colleagues from work and friends from my expanded social circle. Kevin did not attend, but had sent a brief text. "Congrats on the house anniversary." The simple acknowledgement, devoid of bitterness or demands, suggested he might finally be accepting the reality of the situation. Whether this acceptance stemmed from genuine growth or merely practical recognition of an immovable obstacle was unclear, but the result was the same: peace. Looking around at the people gathered in my living room that evening, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. My home remained my sanctuary, protected by legal structures, but more importantly, by my own unwavering willingness to stand firm in the face of immense pressure. The entire experience had taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to maintain healthy boundaries, even when doing so is incredibly difficult and painful. In the quiet moments after everyone had left, I walked through the rooms of my house, appreciating each space and the memories it held. The kitchen where I had learned to cook increasingly adventurous meals, the office where I built my career, the living room where I now entertained friends who respected and valued me for who I was. This house represented more than just property. It embodied my journey towards self-respect and the courage to protect what truly mattered to me. In refusing to give it away, I had ultimately given myself something far more valuable: the knowledge that I could stand firm in my convictions, even against the people who had known me my entire life. The irrevocable trust had secured my home legally, but the true security came from within, from the personal boundaries I had established and defended. That was a foundation no one could take away, a lesson I would carry forward into all my relationships. Life continues to evolve, as do family dynamics. My parents and I maintain a relationship that, while not perfect, is more honest than before. Kevin and I interact minimally, but without active conflict. And I continue to build a life that reflects my values and priorities, not the expectations or demands of others. Have you ever had to defend your boundaries against family pressure? How did you handle it?